Hello. So this video is going to be a performance review of Dickie Beau's Showmanism, a concise histrionic performance, directed by Jan Willem van den Bosch at London's Hampstead Theatre. So I loved this play. I absolutely thought it was incredibly amazing, which is quite. I'm. This is going to sound stupid, but I'm quite happy about that because. I was not sure about it going in. My friend Mike Grundman, who is our field director here on Literary London, he is on a scheme where he can get access to very affordable theater tickets. And he sort of said, this seems like one that maybe you would enjoy. I wasn't sure about it. I'm very cautious about one-person shows because sometimes they're quite good and sometimes they really are not. And really all that I knew about Showmanism before actually seeing it was that it's a one-person show, and my sense was that it revolves around theatrical anecdotes, which is more or less true. It is great theater performers, great actors, great stage stars, like Sir Ian McKellen, Peter Sellers, Fiona Shaw, people like this, that I think Beau had interviewed and recorded the interviews, and he lip syncs to the recordings. So he performs physically what... Sorry, I'm still slightly sick, but I think I've drowned it mostly in orange juice. But he performs these recordings by McKellen, by Shaw, by Sellers, whoever it is. And he does it really, really well. And he switches personalities throughout the show. So when it's McKellen speaking, Beau will sort of physically sit in one way. He will hold his body in one particular way. And then when it shifts to the next speaker, his physical presence will change. And it's really, really, really well done. And actually, that's one of the things that I found most impressive about this show was Beau's physical presence and the physicality, the difficulty of doing the kind of show that he was doing. Because performing can be quite physically taxing, right? Like you're expending a lot of energy to create usually one character. And in this instance, Beau is moving from character to character very rapidly in some portions of this play. And unlike in a normal situation where you're being double cast or triple cast or whatever it is, right? You're playing 2 roles, 3 roles, more than that, whatever it is. Normally, those transitions happen off stage, right? Like your one character is in one scene and you go off, and then you can sort of reorient yourself and get into the headspace of your second character, and then you come back on. Beau did not get to do that, right? Because he is on stage the whole show. And so for instance, one bit where he sort of sat in a chair with a pair of glasses on with sunglass lenses that go up and down. He switches back and forth between 4 different characters. One character where both of the sunglass lenses are up, one where just the right lens is down, one where just the left lens is down, and one where both lenses are down. But in addition to moving these lenses appropriately for whichever character it is, the way that he holds his body, his physical posture, his facial expression the way that he uses gesture shifts for each of these 4 different speakers, and he does it immediately, right? There's no coming off stage, resetting, and then going back on as a new character. It is almost instantaneous, right? And that's incredibly impressive from the perspective of looking at the craft of Beau's acting. And it's especially, I think, impressive because he's lip syncing this. And I think that actually makes it harder in some sense, right? Like you're not speaking the lines, you're not talking as these characters. You are following along and building their personalities on a visual level, almost of mime. And there is some miming in the show where Beau sort of does the I'm in a box bit, but it actually works out quite well because one of the thematic elements of this show that I find really, really, really fascinating, and so this is a show that I think possibly more than any of the other 8 shows total that I'm seeing while I'm in London for this month, I think this is one that I'm going to keep coming back to in my mind and keep sort of thinking about and considering the implications of it. Because the actors that are interviewed for the show are working through these sort of ideas of what does theater mean? What does it mean to do theater? What are the basics? What are the core elements of it? How does theater reflect on identity? How does theater construct identity? How does theater undercut, in some ways, the construction of identity, right? All of these elements to it that are really, 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 really fascinating. And there was two real themes that were most interesting to me. And one was the idea of identity in the theater. And this is quite central to what Beau seems to be exploring, right? Because that's crucial for actors, right? When we step on stage, we put aside parts, at least, of our own identity to adopt someone else's identity, right? We become that character, whatever that means for our particular acting process. Whether that's sort of method acting, whether that's the Stanislavski approach, or whether that's more character acting, whether that's I'm not much of an actor, I just play myself type things, right? Where you're very much bringing your own personality to that character rather than setting aside your large elements of your personality to adopt whatever that character might be. But you are nonetheless foregoing your own identity, your own experience in order to put on someone else's. And so this is really, really quite important in the play. And it starts with the famous opening line of Hamlet, which is "Who's there?", which is regarded by some scholars and critics as the greatest opening line of any play ever written. And there's very good reason for regarding it that way, and it has to do with the sort of philosophy of identity and exploration of identity, including within the theater, and this sort of interest, fascination in what it means to perform, but also what it means to be human and to look out into this strange universe in which we all exist. And sort of large metaphysical and existential questions that we as human beings pose to that strange and incomprehensible, in many ways, universe. But it also is this fundamental question about identity, right? Who's there? Who are you? And of course, for the actor, that becomes a very fraught question in many instances, right? What it means to be a performer, an actor, someone who takes on the persona of different characters. That's a very, very tricky thing to answer, right? And so, like, one of the issues becomes, what does it mean for the identity of an actor if you are putting on a different personality, if you are putting on a different way of speaking, if you are putting on the traits of a different person other than yourself? How does that undercut or compromise or in some other ways maybe even illuminate the process of identity formation, right? Because this is the other way of looking at it, of course, is we all construct our identities within our daily lives, right? Who we are is performative in the sense that we represent ourselves in particular ways for particular purposes within particular circumstances. Now, to greater or lesser degrees, those presentations may be truthful or they may be deceptive, but that is a sort of fraught, again, existential question of what it means to be true to oneself. And so that sort of question is, on the one hand, I think more challenging for actors who regularly perform as people other than themselves. On the other hand, that process of acting can give us insights into the nature of identity formation and what it means for us to perform our identities on a day-to-day level. So I think that's really, really interesting. The other thing that I found really fascinating, the other thematic that I found really, really fascinating was the sort of tension in the show between these competing modes of understanding the theater as a seeing vessel or a seeing operation, right? The Greek term theatron, theatron comes from the seeing place. And yet, by the time you get to the Elizabethan period, the era of Shakespeare, people would talk about going to hear a play because it was the words rather than the visuals. And this is a very important concern about the nature of culture, auditory cultures or oral cultures versus visual cultures. And pretty much at the beginning of Showmanism, and this is actually where we sort of start to really understand the title of the show, which of course is a play on shamanism, which is about the sort of religious exploration of divine existential truths through unusual insight gained through some kind of esoteric practice. We start with really an amalgamation of two biblical passages, John 1:1 and John 1:14. In the beginning was the Word, which comes from John 1:1, and the phrase, and the Word was made flesh, which comes from John 1:14. It sort of jams them together, and they're thematically linked, they're connected, so it's not an unreasonable jamming together. But it raises this sort of idea of the actor making flesh the words of the script, that the script itself is language. And Ian McKellen in the recordings talks about you need the actor, you need the audience, and you need the script to have a play. And there's other, of course, types of performances, rituals, dance, music, performance art, things like this that don't require a script. But traditionally, in order to have a play, you need a script. And the script is sort of the origin, in a way, of it. Performance studies people might disagree with that, but I, coming from my background as a drama scholar, and so this idea, like the script is words, and through acting, those words are made flesh. And there is this sort of divine creative power in that, right? To bring into existence a world that did not exist before is, in some sense, a godly act, not sort of godly as in holy or sacrosanct or whatever. It does not an episcopal act or an evangelical type act necessarily, but it is a reiteration of the creative power of the divine within creation myths, right? And it doesn't matter necessarily which creation myth, whether it's the biblical creation myth, whether it's the Haudenosaunee creation myth, whether it's the Hindu creation myth, whatever it is. There are these sort of universal appeals to creation myths in which the world is built through divine power, divine will. And in some sense, the creation of a theatrical world, a world on stage, is a repetition of that. There is something Genesis-y about the theater in that sense. We make the word flesh in that we take a thing that has the possibility of being inert and we make it alive. We abiogenesis it in a way. That's not quite right, but you get what I'm saying, right? And so this is one of the sort of interesting things. Again, there's this sort of divine meditation. There's a shamanism to showmanism, and the sort of esoteric practice through which that spiritual or divine insight is derived in this case is theatrical practice. And at the same time, this sort of fascination with the distinction between seeing and hearing, because it is and there's discussion in there about ancient Greek amphitheaters as sound machines, and sort of the importance of hearing the word. And that, of course, is crucial to a play like Shamanism, where actually almost all of the sounds that we're hearing are pre-recorded, whether that's the interviews, whether that's music, whether that's various sort of transition sound effects, whatever it is. Almost everything that we're hearing is pre-recorded. But, and this is a really crucial point, we also we could just listen to the audio recordings, right? That would be fine. We could do that. On the level of getting the content of the play, that actually would be fine. But what we lose if we just hear a play like Showmanism is what we see. The play is brought to life by Beau's physical presence as he mimes, as he dances, as he holds his body in different ways to build different characters, as he changes costumes, whether that's taking off the white jumpsuit at the beginning and standing just in his underwear and socks, which he spends a lot of the play in, whether that's sort of putting on this sort of saffrony orange dress robe type garment that very much sort of looks like the robes of certain like Tibetan monks, I think, Nepalese monks, whatever it is. Beau's physical presence and practice on the stage is what builds the show, even though he is disconnected from what we're seeing and hearing. He's lip syncing to it, but it is not his physical voice that we're hearing. We are seeing him act the show out, and without that, it would be a much hollower show. So, again, I can probably go on and on about this because I do think this is such an amazing show. I'm really, really, really jazzed about it. I'm really, really happy that Mike took me to see it. The theater at Hampstead Theater, the particular theater room where that show was going on was not fully sold out. There's a reasonable number of people, but I do think I was like one of maybe 2 or 3 people who did a standing ovation at the end, because I really, really, really thought it was that good, and I was so impressed by it. And yeah, it was amazing. I normally very much enjoy the theater, and I don't necessarily. I feel like I'm gushing in a very sort of fangirl type way, and I don't mind that because I feel like this show earned it. But I feel like that is also quite unusual for me. Just how sort of enthusiastic I'm feeling about this show.